So that guy I met on eHarmony? Yeah. We're out together last night and I step off a curb and snap, heel breaks right off my shoe.
Oh no.
So I say, hell with it, take them off so I'm barefoot, and you'll never guess.
What?
He leans over, takes off his shoes and socks, and now we're both...
You're joking.
Amazing, right?
At eHarmony, you'll find someone you can be yourself with. Get who gets you on eHarmony. Sign up for eHarmony today.
You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 127, 3 Ways to Mind Your Bone Density. Your bone density is a big deal and becomes a bigger deal the older you get, but it's really easy to ignore because it doesn't pester you as it slowly declines. It's easier to maintain high bone density than to try to correct low bone density, especially when you're older. So do your future self a favor and literally give her a strong and stable structure to live in. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hello, my friend, and welcome to today's episode. I am so happy that you're joining me here today. Are you ready to catch a cold? I kind of think if you're ready, you're less likely to get one. But if you do, you'll be prepared to get over it more quickly and with less severe symptoms. Today, we're going to talk about your bone density. Do you know what yours is? I'm sure you probably know that you don't want to have low bone density. It gets talked about, which is a very good thing, but not a lot of specifics of what to do and when to start are mentioned, which is not so great. Most old people know that they don't want to break their hip and end up in a nursing home in chronic pain. But do you think about preventing that now? Good for you if you do. It's way easier to prevent that outcome if you start now than if you start when you're 80 and your bones are already super fragile. And it doesn't need to be complicated or difficult or life-draining right now. Other than not wanting to break your hip and have to go into a nursing home, why do you care about having strong bones? Do you have reasons? Your skeleton is your structural framework, and you want to have a strong structural framework so that you can have a more robust experience of life and be able to do all the things you want to do. Most people with osteopenia or osteoporosis don't have noticeable symptoms, which is why it's important to get your bone density checked periodically. But some people do have symptoms, mostly pain. There are studies showing chronic pain in people with osteoporosis who have not yet had a fracture. There are tons of consequences of chronic pain, even at a low level, that impact your quality of life. Impaired sleep decreases your effectiveness in pretty much every area of your life. The emotional impact of pain is huge. Being able to complete your daily activities is difficult, let alone being able to show up to help other people in their lives. Some people with osteoporosis say carrying weight is painful and bending and moving is painful. They feel chronically fatigued or that cold and damp weather affects them more than it used to. The biggest problem I see with having low bone density is that you're kind of a ticking time bomb. Any misstep can be catastrophic. If you don't get your bone density tested, you don't know how bad things are until you have a devastating injury that might result in lifelong pain and or decreased independence. If you do know you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, you know that you're fragile and you can't do the same rough and tumble type things that other people can do. You have to be a bit limited. Bone density is also pretty tightly correlated with muscle strength. If you have feeble bones, you most likely have feeble muscles because strong muscles pull strongly on bones, making the bones adapt to that force. On the one hand, it seems kind of obvious, but the reality is that if bone density is measured to be low in someone, the medical establishment will say, "Oh, you have low bone density. Let's improve your bone density," and do one of the only things they ever do, which is prescribe a drug instead of saying, "Oh, you have low bone density. Let's get you jacked." which I think would be an awesome thing to say to a fragile little old lady. I think about the tasks that promote strong bones in 3 general categories: the way you move, your hormone status, and your nutrient absorption. This doesn't need to be overwhelming or some kind of exhaustive list. I do think it's useful to have an idea of the things that can influence your bone density so that you're not stuck thinking it's all about calcium or genetics or bisphosphonate prescription medications. Osteopenia and osteoporosis are serious and seriously life experience limiting and seriously preventable. And you have 3 main dials you can manipulate to create the experience that you want. When you can maintain structural strength into your later decades, you're much less likely to be limited in terms of adventures you can experience. You're more likely to be able to assist others, and you're more likely to be able to maintain healthy movement patterns that prevent injuries and chronic pain. We talked about those in episode 61, Choose Not to Have Injuries or Chronic Pain, so go back and listen to that one. A lot of injuries and pain conditions that crop up are related to our structural alignment and movement patterns. When you correct body alignment and posture, you create a lot more years of pain-free movement. Conversely, if you become kyphotic, that hunched over position, or otherwise have to hold your body in strange positions because of weakened or broken bones, you create more pain and weakness in other, often distant areas of the body. The way you move now matters to your future self a lot. Do you know which athletes have the strongest bones? Cyclists, swimmers, rock climbers, bowlers? It's gymnastics. High strength and high precise, high impact ground strikes. Most endurance athletes, like cyclists and swimmers and even distance runners, have low bone density. Athletes participating in power sports that generate a lot of force or impact have the highest bone density. There's a guy who invented a workout system that I use who also invented a different device called OsteoStrong that was inspired by the forces acting on a gymnast's body. His name is John Janquish. He does a good job of explaining how your central nervous system has a process called neural inhibition that prevents you from damaging yourself, which is a very good thing. But if you fire a muscle that's connected to a weak bone, neural inhibition prevents you from producing more force with that muscle, which prevents you from growing that muscle and getting stronger so that you don't damage that bone. So raising bone density takes away some limitation on your ability to grow more muscle. And strengthening your muscles strengthens your ligaments and tendons, all of which is good. If you need to work on your bone density and you have access to a location with an OsteoStrong machine, you should totally look into it. The main thing with OsteoStrong is regrowing bone that you've lost. Studies show that gymnasts get up to 10 times their body weight in impact force in their gymnastic escapades. One study found that what you need to effectively grow new bone is 4.2 times your body weight. The vast majority of people who lift weights don't lift nearly that much. Lifting heavy correctly is ridiculously awesome for you. But for severely osteoporotic people, OsteoStrong is able to deliver a force that's impossible to achieve on your own in the gym. There are a couple of other cool devices that help a little bit with bone density: whole body vibration and high power PEMF. I do both of those on a regular basis just for funsies. Well, I guess for the other beneficial effects that they have on me, which are many, but they do both also have a positive effect on bones. Cool devices are fun and exciting, and I love them. But the best friend you have for your bone density is free and available to everyone equally. It's a pretty great gift that we all take for granted and is no respecter of persons, so to speak. Can you guess what it is? I've talked about Dr. John Vernikos before. She was the director of life sciences at NASA for a long time. She wrote a book, and in it she says, "While the country was figuring out who pays for healthcare, here I was sitting on a practical, inexpensive, scientifically proven solution derived from research paid for by the taxpayer. If astronauts could regain their good health after shaking off the ill effects of spaceflight, so could people suffering similar health problems due to their sedentary lifestyles. My challenge was to provide clear, practical guidance to show the public the value of making use of our old friend, gravity, simply through doing everyday activities that were of a different nature than traditional, vigorous exercise in the gym." End quote. Did you hear it? Our old friend, is gravity. All too often we neglect our old friend and we don't let it work its magic on us. Sad. Hey there, just a quick interruption to say I think the jury's still kind of out on how bad and in what way it's really bad to put aluminum on your skin, but it doesn't seem great, and I figured, why not avoid it? Well, because all of the aluminum-free deodorants I ever tried didn't work. Until I tried Lume. This is the first aluminum-free deodorant I ever tried that actually worked. I was instantly converted. Then, over time, I discovered that the answer to my whole family's itchy skin after every shower problem is Lume's acidified body wash. It's awesome, and their acidified body butter keeps our skin soft and hydrated. They even have a laundry product that makes your clothes smell great. I can't say enough good about Lume. Plus, their commercials are hilarious. You should watch one on YouTube if you haven't seen one yet. If you want to give Lume a try, there's a link in the show notes that will give you $5 off your order. My favorite is the Pink Peony Body Wash. It smells like washing yourself with bubble gum, which I wouldn't recommend, but I do recommend Lume. Okay, back to the show. Most of us tend to lose about 1% of our bone density per year. Astronauts lose 2 to 5% of their bone density per month. Why? From a very real thing called gravity deprivation syndrome. I would personally love to experience gravity deprivation for a short amount of time. It would be so cool to float around and, I don't know, eat M&Ms from the air or whatever you do when you waitlist. But I don't want to suffer the effects of gravity deprivation syndrome. Some astronauts say that getting your inner ear switched back on by coming back into a gravity field when you come home is pretty unpleasant, and that trying to coordinate your movements and maintain your balance is a challenge. And they'll often let go of their pen or their book or their orange or whatever, expecting it to float next to them, and then it shockingly falls on the floor. That would be pretty funny. I don't expect my pen to float next to me, but a growing number of studies are reporting that tons of us are experiencing a form of gravity deprivation syndrome. Not by expecting our snacks to float around by us, but by removing gravity from our lives. Removing gravity likely accounts for at least 22% of cases of coronary heart disease, 22% of cases of colon cancer, 18% of osteoporotic fractures, 12% of cases of diabetes, 12% of cases of hyperthyroidism, and 5% of cases of breast cancer. Researchers Stephen Lewis and Charles Hennekins, who estimated those numbers, estimate that this results in at least $24 billion of U.S. healthcare spending. All preventable by our old free friend, gravity. We remove gravity from our lives by sitting for long stretches of time. It's a big deal with $24 billion consequences, and it's not nearly as fun as floating around with your hair sticking up, eating M&Ms out of the air. You can decrease your chances of getting all of those diseases I just listed, including osteoporotic fractures, by befriending gravity a little bit more. Joan Vernikos explains that space research proves that the body responds best to gravity signals that are frequent, low-intensity start-stop type movements experienced frequently throughout the day. This means that a high-intensity gravity-resistant workout like lifting heavy weights at the gym is good, really good, but probably not enough. You can't work out once a day and expect to be able to sit the rest of the day. It's really about getting your butt off your chair on a regular basis. In her book, she says, the results show that the benefits came not from how long one stood up, but from how many times one stood up. She says you need to stand up a minimum of 16 times a day if you're lying down all day, or 32 to 36 times per day if you're sitting all day. This means not sitting for more than 20 to 30 minutes at a time. Dr. Vernikos did a bunch of studies showing that the negative effects of sitting on plasma volume, heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol, ACTH, plasma renin, catecholamines, and vasopressin come on after about 20 minutes of sitting. So just getting your hindquarters up off your chair every 20 minutes helps prevent a lot of those consequences that start building up after 20 minutes. It's really not about how long you stand up, just how many times you stand up throughout the day. It's not even a problem of how many total hours you spend in a seated position, but how many minutes or hours you sit in a row without standing up. And standing up for hours in the very same position without a break is also not great. So how can you use this NASA space wisdom to improve your life? It really is about getting a little timer and standing up every 20 minutes. I've mentioned this before, but once I saw how my mentor, Brian Johnson, does this, it totally clicked for me. He sets a timer on his old school Casio watch for 1,000 seconds, which is his little thing he likes to do. It's 16.666666 minutes. And he goes about his day doing his work. When that timer goes off, he doesn't even break concentration. He just stands up from his chair as he keeps working and sits back down and resets the timer to stand up again in another 1,000 more seconds. That's when I realized that I could do that. I work at 2 pharmacies, one where I stand the whole time and one where I sit. Maintaining high energy all day used to be a struggle for me back in my 20s and 30s. It was not fun, and Tuesdays were pretty draining. I didn't try to overanalyze it back then, but since I've started standing up every 17 minutes throughout my 10-hour shift of sitting, it's gotten way, way, way easier. I'm not wiped out at 4:30 p.m. like I used to be. I still have energy to do other stuff when I get home at 7 o'clock at night. Part of that is from other daily habits I've mastered over the last few years, but a lot of it is just never sitting for more than 20 minutes in a row. It's amazing. Please try it. Send me a message at healthcouragecollective@gmail.com if you need any tips or encouragement of how to do this. I have a silent timer that doesn't beep and annoy my coworkers. It's fabulous. Standing and walking aren't enough to get your bone density crazy high, especially if it's low right now, but they're way better than sitting for long periods in a row. And once you add in some high impact or properly performed heavy lifts, you'll be set up for more structural strength. Whew. That was way number 1 to mind your bone density, the way you move. Way number 2 we'll talk about is nutrition. You aren't quite what you eat, you're what you're able to absorb and assimilate into your body. Your bone density is actually a good indicator of how well you're able to properly absorb the minerals you eat. If your bone density is low, you might have a problem with your microbiome, digestive enzymes, or stomach pH. You probably know that your bones need calcium. The US recommends 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day. Europe recommends 700. A 2009 study showed that 566 milligrams a day of calcium was enough to protect bones as long as you have enough vitamin D. One study of 170,991 women even found that more than 700 milligrams a day of calcium actually increased the risk of hip bone fractures. You do need enough calcium, but not too much, and it's definitely not the only thing you need. Your bones are made with proper amounts of calcium, magnesium, manganese, copper, boron, phosphorus, strontium, and vitamins D and K2, and some other things. We need to have a separate discussion about the vital importance to all of your other body functions of proper amounts of minerals in your diet via food and or supplements. Just remember that minerals do a lot, and that excess calcium and calcium without all of the other minerals can actually be harmful to your bones. And calcium without vitamin D and vitamin K2 is likely to go to the wrong places, like your coronary arteries, which is very bad. The best way to optimize your diet to improve your bone density would be to get your nutrient levels tested. Without that, we're just guessing, but chances are quite high that you're low in magnesium and low in vitamin D and low in vitamin K2. Most people are. If I were to take a shot in the dark, I would start there. Most people are deficient in those 3 things, and they have a huge impact on your bone density. Go back and listen to episode 21 about vitamin K2 if you're interested in that. It's one of my favorite subjects, so it's one of my favorite episodes. K2 is awesome, so don't overlook it. It's such an easy way to make sure you're getting your calcium where it needs to go, and most people don't get nearly enough. If you know your bone density is low and you're looking for a good supplement, find a bone health supplement like OsteoPrev by Orthomolecular or Bone Restore by Life Extension. OsteoBalance by Pure Encapsulations is okay, but it doesn't have any vitamin K2, so you would need to add that. You just want something that has more than just calcium. There might also be other good combination products that I just don't know about yet. It's good if they have boron in there. You'll probably need additional magnesium and vitamin D beyond just what's in your OsteoPrev. The point is to think of way more nutrients than just calcium. Colorful vegetables have trace minerals and polyphenols that can help with bone building. Lactoferrin in whey protein can help support strong bones. Too little protein is bad for bone building, but tons of protein is actually also bad for bones. Drinking soda is really bad for literally everything except for maybe Coca-Cola's revenue sheet. So please, 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 please don't drink soda regularly if you want to be a force for good in the world in the future. It's also bad for your bones. So is excessive coffee and alcohol and excessive standard iodized salt and excessive amounts of vitamin A. And smoking. Smoking's bad. Just don't do it. Having too low of body fat is bad for your bone density, and having a high homocysteine level that has a negative effect on bone density as well as your risk for cardiovascular disease. Everything interconnects. Remember all those milk mustache ads from the 90s? Everyone cool had a milk mustache ad. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, that kid who was Tim the Tool Man's son on whatever that show was called that had Wilson, the neighbor whose face you never saw. Jennifer Aniston, Britney Spears, Venus and Serena Williams, Harrison Ford, Beyonce, even Taylor Swift had a milk mustache ad in 2008. Sorry, pop icons, but dairy is not that great for bones. I think industrial dairy is bad all around, but if you tolerate and like responsibly farmed dairy, I don't think it's bad or good for your bones per se. It's okay for your bones, but if you hate or don't tolerate dairy, your bones are going to be fine. Digestive issues like microbiome imbalance, gluten intolerance, leaky gut, certainly Crohn's, even acid reflux disease can all contribute to poor nutrient absorption, which can lead to low bone density. Long-term use of acid-reducing drugs, especially proton pump inhibitors like Prevacid, Prilosec, Protonix, Nexium, Acifex, and Dexilant, can all lead to low bone density via raising stomach pH to the point that minerals are not properly absorbed. This is a big deal. If you're on one of those drugs, see what you can do to get off it if possible, unless you have Barrett's esophagus or esophageal cancer or something extreme. So talk to your doctor for sure. Another thing could be that you just don't get enough minerals from your diet. So improving the natural minerals you get naturally from your diet and possibly supplementing with some minerals might also be something you need to do. The third way to mind your bone density is to optimize your hormones. Your number one hormone that you want optimized is usually always your insulin. So make sure you're taking care of that. It can help keep you on track. You want your cortisol in check also. High stress causes chronically high cortisol, and chronically high cortisol decreases your bone density. So does taking corticosteroid medications because they act like cortisol in your body. Having too high of thyroid levels can decrease your bone density. Most people's are too low, but if yours are high or you get too high of a dose of thyroid replacement, that will impair your bone density. This isn't a hormone, but just really quick, new studies are starting to show that taking stimulants for ADHD like Adderall and Ritalin and such decrease bone density and may have lifelong impact. They don't know yet, but they recommend monitoring for extended periods of time. I can tell you that a ton of people, many of them young, take those medications and may be impacting their long-term health. Human growth hormone and insulin like growth factor 1 can help a little with bone density. Testosterone in the proper amounts helps to protect your bones from loss. Also great for your muscles and breast health. DHEA is a hormone of youth and seems to protect bone health. One study showed a 4% increase in bone density after adding DHEA. Studies are inconsistent about how much progesterone helps bone density as we age. It either helps or it doesn't, but it for sure doesn't make it worse. Progesterone is good for lots of other things, so you want a proper and balanced amount. If you've listened to me much before, you'll probably know what I'm going to say next because I always get on this soapbox, but synthetic progestins are not progesterone, and synthetic progestins have been shown to decrease bone density. One synthetic progestin used as birth control in young women, Depo-Provera, has a black box warning about decreasing bone density. Not good. The Women's Health Initiative study is one of the most controversial and oft-repeated studies of all time. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of hours have been spent fighting over its results, but one of the conclusions of the study that didn't get any argument from anyone is that estrogen protects bone density. Women on estrogen in the study had 40% fewer hip and spine fractures than those not, unless they were smokers. Smokers cancels out any positive effect of estrogen on your bones. Maintaining youthful levels of estrogen definitely protects bone loss. It appears that the positive effects last for up to 15 years after you stop taking the estrogen. Not much else does that. What if your countertop stayed clean for 15 years after you stopped washing your dishes? That would be pretty great. If you want to know more about the basics of bioidentical hormones, be sure to check out my Udemy class. That will get you up to speed and feeling confident and informed if you're considering looking into taking them. I thought this would be a quick and easy episode, but there's so much to having good bone mineral density. We didn't even get into osteoblasts versus osteoclasts, but just know that like everything in your body, you're constantly breaking down bone and also constantly building it back up. You don't want to break it down more quickly than you're building it back up. Maintaining a good bone density with a happy equilibrium of osteoclastic and osteoblastic activity is much easier than trying to build up bone density from a really low starting point. It can be done, but it takes a lot of attention to all three of these areas, and it gets harder the older you get. So if you get your bones strong now, and then all you have to do is maintain them, you're way better off than waiting till you become a porcelain doll of an 80-year-old and trying to get to work on it then. I think if you can avoid having to take a prescription medication for osteopenia or osteoporosis, you absolutely should. There are some bad and scary things with those medications. For some people, they're kind of the only choice, and they are better than breaking your hip or vertebrae, but barely. Post-bisphosphonate prescription bones are abnormal in a bad way. Dr. Weinstein has shown that they have abnormally large osteoclasts with an abnormally high number of nuclei. Plus, they can sometimes cause osteonecrosis of the jaw, which is bone death due to insufficient blood supply, because they prevent bone breakdown so much that the old bone hangs around longer than it should, but it still loses its life support. It's not good. If you have questions about minding your bone density, send me a message at healthcouragecollective@gmail.com. Now, do you remember the 3 things to consider? Active recall helps cement your learning into place so that you won't forget. Remember what they are? The way you move, the nutrients you're able to absorb, and your hormone balance. Those are the 3 things. High-impact activities like gymnastic vaulting promote bone density the most. Lifting heavy things is hugely important. Allowing gravity to work on your body every 20 minutes by standing up from your chair. Eating and or taking all the right minerals and vitamins and making sure your gut health is optimized so that you can absorb them. Vitamins K2 and D are super important. And keeping your hormones as balanced as you feel comfortable doing, naturally or via supplementation. Estrogen is the biggest player, but also reducing your stress and making sure your thyroid levels are on target, and testosterone and DHEA play a role. You've got this. I would love for you to get a DEXA scan. Please seriously consider it. Google DEXA scan near me and see what comes up. They're about $75 in my area. I do one once a year and it takes about 7 minutes. It'll give you tons of useful information, and making an intelligent plan starts with knowing where you are and where you want to be. Once you have that, we can get you on track to getting there. Next week, we're going to talk about the value of accepting age-related decline. Kind of counter to what I typically preach. I think it's going to be good. Until then, create structural strength and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.
So that guy I met on eHarmony? Yeah. We're out together last night and I step off a curb and snap, heel breaks right off my shoe.
Oh no!
So I say, hell with it, take them off so I'm barefoot, and you'll never guess.
What?
He leans over, takes off his shoes and socks, and now we're both...
You're joking.
Amazing, right?
At eHarmony, you'll find someone you can be yourself with. Get who gets you on eHarmony. Sign up for eHarmony today.